Kia ora! My name's Damon, and believe it or not, I'm actually out in the bush on the South Island of New Zealand, the West Coast. This place is stunning, and I'm out here to talk about a question that's been burning me up for quite a while. Why is New Zealand so epic? Why is everything just so different? Our plants and our animals. So I'm going to talk about an isolation. Not about the isolation we've just had due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Talking about an isolation that was far more dramatic on a different scale. An isolation that happened not just a couple months ago, but 85 million years ago. And it all started when New Zealand broke away from Gondwana land. Now you're sitting here asking yourself, what is Gondwana land? Don't worry, I will explain that to you in a hot second. Well, after that hot second, I'm back and I've got a yarn for you. Well, Gondwana land was a landmass made up of all the southern continents, including India. It was separated from the northern part, known to be Laurasia. Now, Laurasia and Gondwana land were two of the minor supercontinents that formed a part of Pangaea, the supercontinent, the massive continent. So, the world did not always look like this. This is a world map of today, and that is New Zealand just in the corner there. So, it actually started off what scientists believe to be looking like this. This is Pangaea, the supercontinent, the one I told you was a big continent. So, Pangaea, when that split up, the two minor continents, Gondwana land and Laurasia, were left. And these two look like so. And scientists believe this happened about 200 million years ago. Also, scientists believe that Pangaea broke apart for the same reason the plates are still moving today. In a very fancy way of putting it, the movement is caused by a convection current that rolls over in the upper one of the Earth's mantle, the hot stuff under the crust. So, just to go through, first stage, Pangaea, the big continent. And then eventually that split to Gondwana land in the southern and Laurasia in the northern. And now it's left with the world we have today. Anyway, let's get back on track with the big thing about this isolation I really wanted to talk about. So, as these plates kept moving, eventually the landmass we know as New Zealand broke away. And when it did, it was carrying a whole lot of cargo. Now you're sitting there, what sort of cargo would have New Zealand been carrying? Well, it was carrying a whole lot of flora and fauna. And when that cargo was cargoed away on the landmass New Zealand, all the flora and fauna become separated from the rest of the world. It became isolated because New Zealand was surrounded by masses and masses amounts of water, and some species couldn't swim away, they couldn't fly away, and to be brutally honest, there was probably no need to, because New Zealand was going to do a thing called adaptation, and it was gonna design the most unique ecosystems in my perspective. So going back to that word adaptation I mentioned before, what it meant for the animals and plants, over time in their isolation, something happened very, very, very slowly. Took millions of years, but they adapted to the environment they were in. A massive part of the way our animals adapted was to do with no land-based mammal predators. Nothing compared to the introduced mammals New Zealand has got today. To be in fact, the only known mammals in New Zealand before that was the long-tailed bat and the lesser short-tailed bat. But don't get me wrong, there were still predators such as the falcon, the laughing owl, but my favourite was the big predator that roamed in the air. Actually quite a beautiful colour out there, isn't it? Good to see the West Coast providing some beautiful colours. Anyway, this big predator that roamed in the air was the Haast eagle. It's a vulture-like bird. Had thick talons, so the feet were like rah. It is believed that their talons were up to 75 millimeters long. Right, that is, wouldn't like that to pick me up in the back. And their wingspan about 3 meters and a body length of what they believe is about 1.4 meters. So these birds were not small, and it's believed they would find and attack prey from the air down to the ground. To be in fact, it is also believed their main food source was a beast called the moa, which I'll yarn about later. So the only predators our animals really had to face was coming from up above, not the ground. So it is believed a fair amount of bird species, such as for example the kakapo, found that it was safer to chill out on the ground. There was plenty of food to indulge in. So this continued until some would say they outgrew their wings, meaning body became too big and the wings had basically no reason to be used. So they adapted to the environment they were in. Another example of adapting was the kakapo's smart, cheeky little cousin, the kea. Anyway, it is believed as the land moved and New Zealand's southern Alps formed, the kea were pushed up into an alpine environment, and they adapted successfully to become what's now known as the world's only alpine parrot. Now, a fun fact about those cheeky little fellas is apparently they have the similar intelligence to that of a human toddler, so about a 4 to 5 year old. The facts vary. So basically, imagine a 4-year-old that can fly, feed itself, and do whatever they want. That is the cheeky kea. Well, I'm going to tell you another yarn now, and it's not going to do with any birds. Well, it will, but I'm going to talk about the adaptation of a plant. Come with me, we're going to find it. Proper prior planning, we have found the lancewood. Everyone get a good look at this. Now the lancewood, this tree is believed to have adapted, used to grow these beautiful luscious leaves when it was young. And one of the birds called the moa, which I also mentioned being a main food source for something like the Haast eagle, as I explained before, this plant was quite intelligent. The moa loved to eat its luscious leaves, so they weren't being very successful at the start. But then it came up with a very, very good idea for all its young ones to grow these hard, not nutritious, not that yummy, actually quite disgusting, that was a bad idea to chew it, leaves. But this is where the lancewood really showed its intelligence. When it grows into its mature years and now spreads out these beautiful luscious leaves up really high, where the moa obviously couldn't reach them. So this is the lancewood. Little fun fact about the lancewood too, if you take the green off each side of the leaf and rub the blunt end of your knife on it, you then have got a piece of string that can fix your shoelaces, no worries at all. Now, those are only some of the examples about how things have adapted in New Zealand. But to put things into a little bit of a conclusion, New Zealand is a unique environment that the effects of being isolated with these types of flora and fauna with minimal predators at the time, flora and fauna which was NZ's cargo of course, is clear. Over 80% of the 2,500 native conifers, flowering plants and ferns are found nowhere else. And out of the 245 species of birds breeding in New Zealand before human arrival, 71% were endemic. So New Zealand is really something special. Now before I go, let's name heaps of plants. Kiki, wineberry. What else do we have? We've got kaukaua. And then most of all we got lancewood, we got tuatara, we got